should we have hanged P.W. Botha?
That's the question.
Others would have loved to do that.
Why do you want Khampepe to recuse herself?
She will be inclined to defend the positions that she has taken.
Is this a monarchy or is this a democracy?
This is the way things are supposed to be.
Mhlekazi, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to us publishing our book soon.
Yeah.
We're speaking to various people. But you know what I'm interested in right now? The discussions that are going on about President Thabo Mbeki and refusal of the prosecution of the enforcers of apartheid, the murderers and everybody. And I'm going to first ask this question. President Thabo Mbeki lost his brother Ojama. He lost his father to prison for a very long time, Boqwana and Muzi. Could he by any chance have an interest in protecting the people who perpetrated his pain, that of his family, and millions of other South Africans? What's your take on that?
No, Muzi, I think the opposite is true. You know, this narrative is actually one of the most cruel narratives you can think of. Because, as you say, President Mbeki's father spent so many years without being a father because he was completely the father of the struggle. Having left for Robben Island, you left President Mbeki's mother in the hands of abuse by the security branch. President Mbeki's sister, Sis Linda, at the receiving end of that abuse. And you spoke about his brother Jama, but you also speak about President Mbeki's son Monwabisi, who today still nobody knows who killed him, where was he killed, and never been buried. But you will recall that President Mbeki has never made this issue of the struggle a personal issue or a family issue.
Absolutely.
At all, not at all, because he understood that the liberation of our country and our continent is a generational responsibility. So the thing about what you are hearing about not wanting prosecutions or not, I'll put it bluntly to you. You could not expect the prosecutors of the regime to prosecute their comrades in the army. And essentially what we are dealing with is to protect those people that actually did the killing. You are not hearing anything about that. But maybe if I give you a little bit of a background to this story, during the period towards the negotiations, the ANC had a number of options. One option was, what are we going to do with people that killed our people? So you say, no, Nuremberg trials. So, but you needed to say, but where are the Nuremberg trials going to take us as a country? Because you are dealing with the people that we're supposed to reconcile with and build the country together. So the Nuremberg trials option was not an option for our country.
Yeah.
Then the second option was to do nothing, behave as if nothing has happened. We say the past is the past, let's go on. But that's impunity. And you could not go with impunity. So you've got these two extremes. The vengeance of the Nuremberg trials and the impunity on the other side.
Yeah.
But then we took a middle ground that says, actually truth, justice, and reconciliation must be at the center of how are we thinking about justice and how are we thinking about transition. That's how then the truth and reconciliation process was born.
But here's a question, Mhlekazi. You mentioned the Nuremberg trials. I like to refer to the IMTFE, the International Military Tribunal of the Far East, because Japan was also involved in the war. And I also like to make an example with how the Taliban dealt with Najibullah, who was the president. When they came in, they grabbed him out of the presidential palace, castrated him, and hung him for a day in a pole for everybody to see. Hideki Tojo, the prime minister of Japan, was hanged. So the question then, I think for us to discuss is forgiveness a strength or a weakness? Is it a strength or a weakness for us Africans?
It is a strength, Muzi. I'm just thinking in the book, the chapter, should we have hanged P.W. Botha?
That's the question. Do people who are asking this question, do you think they wish to have seen P.W. Botha hanging by the neck and him being castrated like Najibullah?
Probably others would have loved to do that. But leadership has a much bigger responsibility. After hanging him today, what will we be like tomorrow? And that's the process. And in the end, this idea of forgiveness is really the strength that we have as African people. Because in the end, Muzi, our responsibility is to humanity. And humanity in all its aspects. In this instance, it includes our erstwhile tormentors. And I think what has not been understood is that this commitment to humanity has been viewed as a weakness. And that's exactly what we are dealing with in the current situation. Because the approach that was taken by our leadership is the approach that is being viewed as a weakness. But let me conclude the story I was making at the beginning. That then, Muzi, you ended up with this process that says, actually, people need to know the truth about what happened to their people. And if you were going to put everybody on trial, Nurembergs, we will not have known the truth. But also you must understand that these are the same people that were in the prosecutorial system, that were still in the leadership of the police, etc., etc. And in any event, maybe they would not even have agreed to this negotiated peaceful settlement. So what then you had to do was to say, but people that are open and honest and truthful, and they themselves ask for forgiveness. The Truth and Reconciliation Committee was given the possibility to be able to do that. It's really not a perfect system, because other people are demanding justice. But the point is, it was going to be to what end are we going to do that? So what then happened, Muzi, is 1998, the process that Bishop Tutu led concluded, and it had the amnesty committee that reviewed a number of these applications. And it ended up with a lot of people that were not granted amnesty. So those people that were not granted amnesty, what it meant is that they now exposed to prosecution. And the country had designed the prosecutorial legislation that the prosecutors were free to deal with those people. And that's the first batch of people that we're dealing with. Then what happened is that 2003, the second report having been given to President Mbeki, that now we are closing the TRC process. It became clear that there were a number of people that had not applied for amnesty. I mean, you will know, you guys in the PAC, PAC had taken a position, for instance, we are not participating in this thing. But you had lots of APLA people in jail. So whilst you are sitting out there and say, we're not participating, you are not the ones that are sitting in jail. And there were lots of people from the other side that were sitting in jail and many other people that were claiming that they are in jail because of political activism. So what then happened is those people applied directly to the president, and President Mbeki was the president. So probably about more than 680 of them, they applied for pardon because the president can issue pardons. So President Mbeki started issuing pardons for some of these Apla people and all of these people. There was a complaint from Bishop Tutu. He says, no, that thing is not right. Because other people have gone through a process and these ones are applying directly to the president. And then there was also another complaint from the Helen Suzman Foundation in similar lines to what Bishop Tutu had raised. And having understood the concerns both from the Helen Suzman Foundation and Bishop Tutu, President Mbeki decided that no, let's rather approach Parliament and let me not continue with this thing, despite the fact that in law I'm entitled to do it. So, but the nation must know what is going on. And then the Parliament itself must put together a inter-party process. And that process was put together. Actually, it was led by the then Nationalist Party or later DA person, Tertius Delport, as the chair of that committee. So that committee decided that let's start looking at the guidelines. This whole process is public. Let's start looking at the guidelines. And the guidelines and this process follows President Mbeki's presentation in Parliament on the receipt of the last report of the TRC, where he says whatever guidelines you put together, those guidelines must never undermine the legislative process which the National Prosecution Authority must follow.
Why do you want Khampepe to recuse herself?
Let's make this point very clear. Khampepe is actually a person very close to President Mbeki.
Okay.
So it's somebody that is respected by us. Two problems we have. We really don't want Khampepe to go into sunset having been a discredited judge. That's the first thing. The second thing, we do not want her in an important process like this, because this process has to be dealt with legitimacy and credibility. You don't want her to be at the center of discrediting this very process. I'm talking about two processes. I'm talking about the Amnesty Committee and the TRC. Khampepe was a committee member of the Amnesty Committee. She is the one that made the decision, for instance, that a person like Mbeki and other people must not be given amnesty. And she is the one person, for instance, that made a decision about certain killers of certain family members that are before her. She made a decision on them. Now,
so this is double dipping.
Yeah, so the point is you can't, for her own sake and for the sake of the process, you can't have the same person, whether right or wrongly, to be seen to be presiding once more on the matters that she has dealt with. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, even more, she was a deputy to Bulelani Ngcuka, who they are the ones that received the people that were supposed to be prosecuted. So they will be the ones that set the wheels in motion in terms of how to deal with those people. And at that particular point in time, they actually appointed the current judge in the Western Cape, Vincent Saldanha, to say he must head up a unit that must advise them on what to do with these 300 or so who failed this amnesty application. So she's in the center of determining how this matter must be processed. Now, in a sense, Muzi, she will be inclined to defend the positions that she has taken. There's a third issue that now occurred. The NPA, as we know it now, raised a different matter. And it says the evidence leader, our brother Ishmenya, is not supposed to be here for two reasons. One of the reasons is that the policy that Mbeki, when he made the presentation in Parliament and Tertius Delport's committee, and then there was a interdepartmental team that was put together to look at the guidelines. Interestingly, that interdepartmental team was led by Vusumuzi Pikoli.
Okay.
Now, the advisor to that team on those procedural guidelines was Ishmael Semenya. Now, the NPA lawyer says, but you can't be the one that is doing all of this inquiry on the same policy that you were the advisor on. So that's the complaint now from the current NPA.
So is it complaining on your side or against the Thabo Mbeki Foundation?
It's complaining against Khampepe.
Oh, okay, yes.
You know, it says, no, this evidence leader that you have is conflicted. In actual fact, if you look at the Ginwala Commission, which is at the center of what Vusi Pikoli is raising, the advisor to Ginwala Commission was Ishmael Semenya.
Why are we using the same people all the time?
That's the point. So that's
This is nepotism. People just making money for themselves. That's why I see it.
So that's and this is a possibility where you've got thousands of other people that you can
Thousands of other lawyers.
So you don't have to do this. Then the NPA apply to Sisi Khampepe, right? And say, no, this fellow is not suitable. And we had an application together with the NPA. Our application was slightly different. We found out that this complaint had also been raised by the Galata lawyers. But there was a private arrangement that in the process of this thing, I will not touch your clients. You will do your own things and I will come later. Now, none of us that are involved in the process have been made aware of this thing.
You're a lawyer yourself. And you've been an acting judge.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Correct.
So you've been an acting judge and you're a lawyer. So you know what's going on there. Let's listen. Yeah. You know what's going on there.
So then we say, no, man, this is a commission of inquiry with evidence leaders. So the evidence leaders must lead the evidence. You can't have Muzi with his own lawyers and so with his own lawyers, Max with his. It's a jamboree of conference of lawyers. But you have employed evidence leaders. So Ish is an evidence leader. So we will be very happy from our side to be led by him as the evidence leader. But he had struck a deal with the Galata lawyers that I will not lead your people because you might raise this complaint against me. But that thing is done privately. So that matter is now is put before Khampepe. So it says, but Justice Khampepe, that's what the NPA says about Ishi's conflict. Our problem is Ishi's private deals without us. So we say, but we can't go on like this. You are continuing to discredit the process. And she issues a judgment. Says, none of you are correct in your complaint. Ish will stay. Then we write to her and says, but Judge, can you give us the reasons why you come to a conclusion like that? Says, I'm giving you no reasons.
I'm asking myself, is this a monarchy or is this a democracy? South Africa, our legal system, can people just, can judges just give a judgment without having to give a reason?
So the point is what we need to do then is to get the other three judges to tell the country that this is the way things are supposed to be. If these 3 judges says this is the way things are supposed to be, then that's okay. Our view is that that process on its own is going to discredit this process. So that's really why we're quite happy with any other judges. You were saying earlier, Muzi, we've got lots of retired judges that are not so associated with this thing that will bring a clear mind. So President Zuma and them, they make 2 other points which are not related to what we're talking about, or maybe one is related. You remember President Zuma went to jail.
Yes.
And his complaint was that that's unprecedented or whatever, but that's a decision that has been taken. His second complaint was that, but you never hear the judge having made a decision, but goes to the media to even defend that decision in the media, even if the scoundrel is President Zuma. So that's President Zuma's complaint. The second complaint that President Zuma has is that during this application, there were the judge that was going to hear the matter was coaching Semenya in terms of how he must formulate his defense against the positions we were making. Now, President Zuma's lawyers are arguing that there are email and WhatsApp exchanges that a whistleblower has alerted them to that. So that's why then they are calling for those emails and those WhatsApp messages. So in a sense, Muzi, you have a serious problem of a process that will be thoroughly discredited. So when we put these papers, we also then ask the President of the Republic, President Ramaphosa, to reconsider his decision. And President Ramaphosa responded. And he says, having seen all of these things, this is not the person I would have put in this committee. And secondly, I've actually sent my emissaries in Minister of Justice to go and talk to her, just to live with dignity.
The president said that.
President Ramaphosa said that, but she refused. Now, Muzi, you are sitting with a very strange situation where she has to make a recommendation and advise President Ramaphosa. But President Ramaphosa says, you are not suitable to advise me. I've made a mistake by appointing you because I was not aware of all of these things. So our argument, Muzi, has been to say, throughout this process, because the argument from the other side is that she doesn't believe she has any conflict. But we're saying, but we don't know what you were doing in the NPA. We don't know what you were doing in the amnesty committee. You have a responsibility as a judge that if you are somehow been involved in these things, you must explain to us, guys, you know I was in the NPA, but in the NPA I was involved with HR. We will accept that. I was not involved with prosecution. You might say I was in the amnesty committee, but in the amnesty committee, I was a filing clerk. So I didn't make any decision that influenced any policy. We will accept that, but she doesn't say any of those things. If I go to the Gata Muzi that you call it, if I go to the Gata, this is a very elaborate scheme to protect these old order generals. It's because these prosecutors from the old order, they were not in a position, they're absolutely not prepared to prosecute their comrades. Now they're looking for a scapegoat. And that scapegoat is Bridget Mabandla. It's very hurtful to her. I was with her last night. It really, really very hurtful. Because these are committed ANC people that will not even speak of 10. And there's apparently two positions that leads to Bridget to be implicated on this. One, it's a memorandum that was sent to her about prosecution of the attempted murderers on Reverend Chigan. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing, is that they sent this memorandum to Bridget. She didn't respond. Mm-hmm. Why that is interference, I don't know.
Is the minister involved? Does she, in her case, or a minister, do they get involved in prosecution of anybody? Wouldn't that? Because that's just an easy way to get a hold of your political enemies, isn't it?
Correct. So
that's what you could do.
In this instance, Muzi, the offices are even very far physically from one another. The roles in terms of the law are very clear. What is this one's responsibility? There is no minister that's supposed to be involved in the prosecution of anybody. The director of public prosecutions, or Bulelani or Vusi would have done, they might have said to the president, we're going to prosecute Deputy President Zuma. Mm-hmm. That matter is too important. You can't just hear that in the media.
That's right.
So they will probably be informing her. And possible correctly, Vusi might say, I'm prosecuting the head of police, Jackie Silebe. So at least I must go and appraise my political principles. That will happen. But these political principles have got no duty to say, this charge is wrong, do this, do that.
Or phone the guy and say, hey, they're coming for you.
No, they can't do that.
I have a question. President Mbeki has been pursued, whether it was a Security Commission, he's always been the bogeyman. And some of the articles that everybody's writing now, he's always this mysterious person who doesn't sleep, who makes all of these decisions. Why do you think that's the case?
Muzi, I met this other old man from the old Broederbond. Mm-hmm. And he says to us, one of our highest concentration of the intellectuals in the Broederbond was to focus on Oliver Tambo. The reason we had to focus on Oliver Tambo is that whether you're talking about MK, sanctions, or anything, the biggest threat to the regime and the white hegemony was Oliver Tambo's ability to outthink us and outthink the West.
He was a very bright man. So
he says, then the problem of that approach of Oliver Tambo is that he took that thinking and gave the ANC the possibility to think. After many years of when Oliver Tambo has died, he says then, those of us that were working in the system realized that in President Mbeki, Oliver Tambo is not dead. So here is the person that still gives the ANC the ability to think and outthink us and outthink the white hegemony at home and in the West. Now, if you see somebody in our lifetime as threatening to the existing hegemony as Oliver Tambo was, then this is why then you needed to cook up all of these schemes around President Mbeki. So you will have had other matters that will be thrown at President Mbeki, absolutely with no evidence. It's exactly the same as the matter we're dealing with today. The matter is plainly hopeless, Muzi. It's really a matter that has. I come back to what President Mbeki says in 1996, when he said we need to start the process of documenting our own history of road to democracy. Because there will come people who will tell us about ourselves and our struggle in their own image. So what we are sitting with now, the commission is relying on books of some fellows from Germany that came to do their PhD here. And they must have been in the country for 6 months and produce a book. And now the book is an authority about how we thought and what needs to happen.
And what we did.
And what we did. And the second authority, it will possibly be Karen Mon from News 24, who kept the story alive on the basis simple of narrative, not on facts. And that's the situation we're sitting with. For the funders, for the popularity, for all of this thing, you need a spectacle. And that spectacle must involve President Mbeki.
And you also need a distraction.
Correct.
Distraction from the fact that South Africa is failing and that the people who supported President Cyril Ramaphosa are the same people who are demonizing President Thabo Mbeki. And the question is why? Why revise history to keep your man from falling because he's actually useless? Why are people revising history? Particularly about President Thabo Mbeki.
You see, Muzi, Bishop Tutu made a warning and says, you see, you mustn't bring so-and-so into the gutter arena of politics. And Bishop Tutu was confident of himself. He says, because I'm a moral voice of South Africa. So when I'm no longer here, that fellow will be the one that must be the moral voice. If you bring him to the
mud pit,
to the mud pit,
you'll mess it up. Yeah.
You will have no moral voice.
Yes.
Muzi, today, the moral voice of politics in our country and in our continent is President Mbeki. And it's very important to those that are very committed to the destruction of our country, as has been led by the liberation movement over time, to say that was not worth it. And the problem is that President Mbeki, every time he raises his voice, you can see the correctness of that vision. And it's important, therefore, that when President Mbeki reminds, whether it's this current government or it's the ANC or it's the AU or all of us, that many people do not appreciate.
Well, time will tell. The sun will rise tomorrow, and there's a lovely hip-hop song that says, remember the sun rises after the night. So good luck. So what's the next step? What's happening next now that the presentations have been made?
So Muzi, we're quite happy to go to the commission. As I'm saying, we will go to the commission. But the issue of Justice Khampepe as the leader of that commission, it's still pending. So the judges are going to make a decision on her suitability. But our commitment is a total commitment to the truth. And then when we take stance and explain this thing, we will explain it as clearly as possible, because rewriting of our history, at least you must do it when we are no longer around. As long as we are here, I think we owe this nation what has happened before and what we envisage that it should be happening.
Fantastic. I'm with you on that one. Thank you. Thank you.